The epistle reading is 1 Peter chapter 2, beginning with the second verse. Like newborn babes, long for the pure spiritual milk, that by it you may grow up to salvation. For you have tasted the kindness of the Lord. Come to him, to that living stone, rejected by men, but in God's sight, chosen and precious. And like living stones, be yourselves built into a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people, that you may declare the wonderful deeds of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were no people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Well, how did we get here? Time flies. I love these before and after photos. In all fairness, seniors, everyone should have to submit them when they come in. We could look at one another and how we've changed. And the plot of that is really interesting. There's some facts. It's a jumble of facts that have happened to us in our lives. You could narrate your birth and where you started school and teachers and transcripts and applications to college and so on. And for all of us, various events in our lives. Just that, on the surface, is profound enough to make your life richly meaningful. I mean, if I could interview these parents and say, tell me about the day this child was born. You could tell that story and there would be a rich amount of emotion in that. And there's so many other moments when you send them off to kindergarten. There's deep emotion. Just wait till you send them off to college. It's knee buckling. Just something. All of these profound moments. And the moments in our lives like that they make us giddy with joy, and the moments in our lives that break our hearts. Painful moments when there's the death of someone that we love. Or someone says, I don't love you anymore, I'm divorcing you. Whatever it may be, our lives. There is a subplot to all of that I think Peter, which Dennis has read for us, invites us to think about. In the plot of our lives, there is a subplot, and it is what God has been doing in your life. And we don't always notice this. We don't always think about it, and yet it's the most important thing of all. It's the thread that runs beneath all of it. It actually began not at your birth, but at the very moment of creation. When God created the universe, God thought of you. God began then to love you. God began then to dream great dreams for you. God decided then that you would not be a puppet that God would manipulate, but that God would plant in your heart and in your mind a desire for deep things, a desire for transcendence, a yearning for meaning. God did all of this. The passage from Peter speaks of growing up. But it's not just growing up, it's growing up into salvation. What does it mean to grow up into salvation? What kind of nourishment is required for this? Peter says that all of us have an identity, and it's not the kind of thing that appears on a card that you could carry in your wallet or on any official record about yourself, but it's the ultimate truth about who you are and who every one of us is. Peter says you are a chosen race. And that word race sticks out for me right now because there's a great debate about race in our country. Peter says you are a chosen race. It's not about skin color. It's about God stamping you with the identity of being God's child. You are chosen by God. That is your real identity. Peter says you are a royal priesthood. Do we have any royalty here today? We have a lot of royalty here today. That would be all of us. I love the scene in John Irving's novel Cider House Rules, where Dr. Wilbur Larch, he runs this home where there are poor orphans, and every night he switches off the light and then he says, "Good night, you princes of Maine, you kings of New England." He wanted those poor orphans to think of themselves in terms of who they really were. They were princes. They were kings. All of you in this room are princes and princesses, kings and queens. God calls us to be a royal priesthood. Peter says that we are spiritual stones, and with us, God would build up his house. I mean, we're the stones in the house of God. I don't know about you, I don't feel up to that, but you don't have to be up to it. It's God's good work. It's God's miracle. We become the stones in God's spiritual house. How shall I say it? Because of all of this, you will never be a nobody. I mean, sometimes something happens in life and somebody treats you like you're nobody. Somebody despises you, they diss you. But because you are God's chosen people, you're never nobody. You're always somebody. You're always God's precious child. If you doubt yourself, you are still God's child. If you fail, and you will fail, and it's okay to fail, you're still God's child. If you succeed marvelously beyond your highest fantasies, you still are God's child, and that's what really matters about you. How do we be attentive to this? How do we think about this? How do we nourish that noble part of us that is God's subplot in our lives? I have 4 points here, and I have to admit it sounds a little bit like a graduation speech or something, but after all, we do have high school seniors here today. So it goes like this. Point number 1, take yourself seriously. Now, that's the kind of thing you shouldn't have to say. Take yourself seriously. Except we live in a culture that teases us into never taking ourselves seriously. Now, I may have a skewed viewpoint of this because I look at things like Facebook and Instagram, and as best I can tell, just nothing serious on Facebook, is there? I've tried this. I've posted something profound on Facebook, and it gets 2 likes. And you put a photo of a puppy dog on Facebook, 300 likes. We really dig that. And there's really important information on Facebook. I looked this morning, and there was one of my relatives. I got up and I'm getting ready to have breakfast. The world needs to know this. It's great. And we do this. So we're tempted to live sort of trivial, silly lives, but take yourself seriously because you are God's child. You are a royal priesthood. You are the stones with which God would build up his house. You just have one life to live, and believe me, it flies by way faster than you can begin to imagine. And then you look back and you think, what? How? It's amazing. You just have one life. You just have some time. And how do you live in a way that's meaningful? How do you make yourself useful during that limited time that you have? It's not all about degrees in the job market. It's about becoming wise. It's about serving. It's about having a robust faith. I thought this week of a line from the first Spider-Man 2 movie. You have to think about that. There are now 2 Spider-Man 2 movies. In the first Spider-Man 2 movie, Spider-Man, Peter Parker, is about to give up. He's tired of being a superhero, but he talks to his grandmother, and his grandmother says to him, I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, that gives us strength, that makes us noble, and finally allows us to die with pride. God has made a hero in all of us. The question is, can we act heroically? Can we have some courage? Can we do something big for God? And something big for God may seem small in the world's eyes. I thought this week about the theologian Henry Nouwen. He was a world-famous author. He was lecturing at Yale and at Harvard. He was a big dog. He was really important. But then he quit teaching at Yale and Harvard, and what he did was he took a job in Canada, living in a home where they care for severely disabled adults, and his job was to take care of one young man named Adam. Everybody questioned him. They said, you're Henry Nouwen, you're a world-famous theologian, you should be traveling and speaking. How could you waste your life on just one person? But Nouwen said that's what God called him to. And if you think it's not important, ask Adam. Or ask Adam's parents. Is it an important enough job? Is it a big enough job? Is it a heroic enough job to take care of one person? And yet never underestimate what God can do with you. When you get home today, Google the name Paul Farmer. Paul Farmer was a doctor. He was on the faculty at Harvard. I mean, that's pretty big in the world of medicine, right? But he kept going on mission trips to places like Haiti, and everywhere that he went, he discovered that there was a lot of tuberculosis, and there was a lousy water supply, and he wondered, can I do something about tuberculosis in these places? So Paul, this is amazing. He single-handedly set in motion events that got 4 countries virtually free of tuberculosis. Just one guy. People don't have tuberculosis in those countries anymore because of Paul Farmer. Just take some courage. It's taking yourself seriously, being willing to be used by God. Now, the second thing that I want to say is a little bit different. I am reminded that Spider-Man, after all, is not real. He is a comic book character. So the second thing that I want to say is don't take yourself so seriously. Like, we take ourselves seriously, but then sometimes you know people who they take themselves very seriously indeed, and they're just a sourpuss, and they're no fun to be around. You don't know they even get all that much done. So don't take yourself so seriously. G.K. Chesterton once said that angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. I think that I wonder about what it would mean for us to fly because we could take ourselves lightly. So that's when we take ourselves so seriously, we miss out on the joy. We miss out on the mercy. We miss out on so much. I loved the part in my Easter sermon where I just sort of repeated some humor from Winston Churchill. Partly I wanted us to have a good laugh. Partly I thought, if people dig this stuff, they might come back after Easter. It's a false hope always, but we clergy can dream. I can't remember which all Churchill lines I told you. I thought, for instance, Churchill had a political rival named Clement Attlee. And someone once said, Attlee is a modest man. And Churchill said, and he has much to be modest about. Or I think I told you about Lady Astor, who said, Winston, if you were my husband, I would put poison in your coffee. And he said, Nancy, if you were my wife, I would drink it. I won't continue with this, but I will repeat one I know I did on Easter, which is the one where Churchill was on a ship, and there were a bunch of GIs, and one of them was drunk, and someone in the room where Churchill was and said, hey, fatso, where's the bathroom? And Churchill said, well, go down the corridor. On the left, you'll notice a door marked gentlemen, but don't let that deter you. How shall I say it? Don't let the problems of the world deter you from the joy, from the lightness of being. God gave us the ability to laugh at ourselves, to take delight in. It's always kind of funny, isn't it? Like somebody stumbles, we just can't help it. We just laugh. I always hope it's not me, but sometimes it's me. And there's something funny about that. God gives us the ability to laugh at ourselves, to take things lightly. I think if we can learn to do that, then we'll get the joy. God created us for joy, even we serious people. And the other thing that happens when we forget how to laugh is we forget about the mercy. The mercy. The question I have is, do you need some mercy? I never run into the people who say, nah, I don't need any mercy. Most people I talk to say, I really need some mercy, and I have a hard time finding it. The world's not merciful out there. The corporate world, I've never worked in it, but I understand it's not entirely merciful. College is not exactly merciful. I did get lucky in my freshman year. I totally fooled around, and I was around the 1st of November, and I had a string of horrible grades. And I went to my physics professor, and I just got lucky. He was like a grandfatherly type. He took pity on me. He had mercy. You don't usually find mercy out in the world. Some people tell me they have trouble finding mercy in their own home. But if we can learn the lightness of being and how to laugh at ourselves and to let mistakes just be mistakes that we can laugh off, then we can learn to be merciful. Third thing I think we always ought to think about, whether we're graduating high school or if you're 90 years old, is to think about the company that we keep. Aristotle said that a friend is someone who helps you to become wise. We know how to find friends who help us to have fun. We know how to find friends who help us to get ahead. But can you find a friend who helps you to be wise? Can you find a friend who helps you to be good? I read an article recently that said the most important thing that you can do between ages 17 and 23 is to find a wise mentor. It's to find a wise mentor, someone in your life who's got some experience, who's got some life under the belt, but yet who loves you, who cares about your soul. Not just the obvious stuff that the world cares about, but the depth of your being. Can you find someone like that? I would say that this applies not just to people between 17 and 23, but maybe to everybody between, 3 and 97. We all need someone who is a wise friend or mentor. I was really blessed. When I was 20, I found such a person. His name was Roland Murphy. He was a professor that taught me at Duke. He was a great teacher, but more important than that, he was a wise mentor. And I stayed with him even after I graduated from school. I never made an important decision without talking to him. He cared about me. He loved me. He encouraged me. He could say hard words to me when I needed to hear hard words. He had a depth of being, and he shared that with me. And he died 10 years ago, and I haven't quite gotten him replaced. I've missed him. Can you find someone wise to be your mentor of whatever age you may be? Could you perhaps become a wise mentor for somebody? And then I'll close with this, and it's short, but it's maybe the most important thing. Gratitude. Seniors, it's a day that your parents get all emotional, and maybe you do too. And what do you say to your parents on such a day? And I would say, tell them thank you. Thank you for all that you have done for me, even though they've probably messed up royally many times. You thank them for this anyway. I've told it earlier services, it's not in my notes, but I'll tell it again. My firstborn came, we did this same thing at senior day here. And then the summer went by and it came time for us to take her to college, and I was very emotional about this, maudlin almost. And so we got in the car to drive her to Durham, and I thought once we get there, I may not be able to speak. And so what I did is I wrote her a letter. And about 15 minutes out of Durham, I handed her the letter, and I said, read this. And it was 4 pages, and most of it was telling her how wonderful that she was and so on. But there was one line in the letter that she latched onto and chose to read back to me. And that one line was, as your dad, I sure have made a lot of mistakes. Like, thank you for calling attention to that at this moment. And what she said after that was cool. She said, your dad, you actually did make a lot of mistakes. She said, but I've never doubted that you loved me, and I'm grateful for that. All of us, whether you're a senior or you've been around 84 years or 8, it doesn't matter. All of us have good cause to be grateful. Somebody loved you. Somebody stuck with you. Somebody put up with you. Somebody gave you a job. Somebody was patient with you. Somebody sat with you when you were sick. Somebody, all these things. Somebody did something. You have good cause to be grateful and express that gratitude. And I suspect that if we did that all the time, if you just said, my to-do list today is I'm going to be grateful and I'm going to express gratitude, that if you did that all day long, like your anxiety level would dissipate, right? Your sense of joy would be enlarged, and the people around you would be blessed. Because instead of griping and complaining, they would hear you saying, thank you, I love you, I'm grateful for you. This, after all, is what royal priesthood kind of people do. This is what people who are chosen by God do. This is what, it is royalty, isn't it? Just to be grateful and to express it. To express our gratitude to God and to each other for blessing us, for not leaving us alone, for creating in us a yearning for love and for depth of meaning, and it's there for us, and we're blessed. Thanks be to God.